Toi hie. Ban muon toi viet fien ban thu bai hoan tuan moa vachach biet. Toi sabat jaun gai. My name is Harper, and 3 weeks after celebrating my 28th birthday, I found myself running through a hotel service corridor in my wedding nightgown, clutching $25,000 in cash. Just hours earlier, I had married Nathan in what I believed was the happiest moment of my entire life. Our ceremony at an Aspen Mountain resort had been breathtaking. Our vows had been heartfelt. Everything seemed absolutely perfect. Then at 1 a.m, Nathan received a phone call that changed his entire demeanor. He stepped onto the balcony with a hardened expression, spoke in hushed, urgent tones, then left to meet someone downstairs. Minutes later, his sister Megan crashed through our door, looking like death itself. She shoved a paper bag stuffed with cash into my trembling hands and spoke 4 words that shattered my world run fast. Trust nobody. Before I continue, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from right now. I am always amazed at how far these stories travel across the globe. And if you believe that truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deep the lies are buried, hit that like button and subscribe immediately. What I am about to share will leave you absolutely speechless. To truly understand how my dream wedding became a desperate escape, you need to know the woman I was before Nathan swept into my life and changed absolutely everything. I was raised in a quiet working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Denver. Our home was a small ranch house with faded yellow paint and a lawn that never quite thrived, no matter how much my father watered it. We did not have designer clothes or fancy vacations, but what we had was infinitely more valuable. We had a family that loved each other fiercely and completely. My father spent 3 decades working construction. He left our house before the sun rose and returned after it set his body tired, but his spirit always bright when he saw his children. His hands were permanently calloused and his back perpetually sore, but he never complained. He used to tell me that watching his kids grow up happy was worth every ache and pain. When I was 15, those strong hands that had built so many things for others could not save him from a collapsing scaffolding at a downtown work site. One ordinary Tuesday morning, my father went to work and never came home. The police officer who delivered the news spoke in gentle tones that I will never forget. Neither will I forget the sound my mother made when she heard the words. Everything changed after that. My mother became both parents overnight. She was already working full-time as a registered nurse, but after Dad died, she picked up every extra shift the hospital would give her. She worked doubles and sometimes triples to keep our small family afloat. I never once heard her complain. She simply did what needed to be done with a quiet strength that I still try to emulate every single day. Those hard years shaped me profoundly. I learned that nothing in life was guaranteed except what you built with your own 2 hands. I threw myself into academics with determined ferocity, knowing that education was my path to a better future. I earned scholarships and worked part-time jobs and graduated college with a degree in education and minimal debt. I had always loved children. There was something magical about watching young minds discover new ideas, seeing that spark of understanding light up their faces. I believed teachers had the power to change lives, and I wanted desperately to be one of those teachers who made a real lasting difference. After graduation, I landed a position at a public elementary school in Denver. The building was old and underfunded, but my students were absolutely wonderful. I stayed late every night preparing lessons and grading papers. I spent my own money on classroom supplies. Teaching became my calling and my passion. My romantic life was a completely different story. I dated occasionally, but nothing ever developed into anything serious. Part of me was terrified of love, I think. After watching my mother struggle as a single parent, I had built thick walls around my heart. I convinced myself I was happy being independent. I convinced myself I did not need anyone. Then 2 years before that devastating honeymoon night, the universe apparently decided I was ready. I met Nathan at a charity fundraiser for underprivileged children. A colleague had convinced me to attend promising networking opportunities and decent food. I borrowed a simple blue dress from a friend and spent most of the evening feeling woefully out of place among all the diamonds and designer labels. I was contemplating an early exit when he appeared beside me at the bar. Nathan was impossibly handsome in that effortless way that seemed almost unfair. Tall and broad-shouldered with dark wavy hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore his tuxedo like he had been born in it. He introduced himself as an attorney at one of Denver's most prestigious law firms. But instead of droning on about his accomplishments the way wealthy men often did, he asked about me. What did I do for a living? What drew me to teaching? What did I love most about my students? I was utterly captivated. What followed was the most romantic year of my entire life. Nathan pursued me with an intensity that took my breath away. Fresh flowers arrived at my school every single Friday without fail. He surprised me with dinners at restaurants where a single appetizer cost more than my weekly grocery budget. He whisked me away on weekend getaways to mountain lodges and seaside cottages. He remembered every single detail I ever mentioned. My favorite flower white peonies, my beloved childhood book about a girl who befriended wild horses, my late grandmother's secret recipe for apple crumble that I had mentioned exactly once in passing. He even tracked down that recipe and had it recreated for my birthday. I fell completely and utterly in love. After 12 months of dating, Nathan proposed. He did it at a dinner with both our families present. My mother and brother Caleb sat beaming on one side of the table. Nathan's parents and sister sat elegant and polished on the other. When Nathan got down on one knee and asked me to be his wife, I said yes through rivers of happy tears. Nathan's family occupied a world I had only glimpsed from far outside. His father, Gregory, was a real estate mogul who had built an empire from scratch through shrewd deals and powerful connections. His mother, Victoria, was a former beauty queen who had aged into an elegant society matriarch. They lived in a sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured grounds and employed a small army of staff. Victoria's reception of me was chilly from the very first meeting. Her smiles were thin and never reached her eyes. Her compliments always carried subtle edges that left me questioning myself. I convinced myself she was simply protective of her son. Surely she would warm to me once she saw how much I loved him. The only genuinely warm presence in Nathan's family was his older sister, Megan. A cardiologist at a prominent Denver hospital, Megan had inherited her father's sharp features, but softened them with genuine kindness. After the proposal, she hugged me tightly and whispered that she was truly happy for us, that Nathan was lucky to have found someone real. Something about the way she emphasized real gave me pause. There was weight behind the word that seemed too heavy for a simple congratulations, but I was too happy to analyze it deeply. I was marrying the man of my dreams. My fairy tale was finally coming true. The months leading up to the wedding consumed my entire existence. Victoria insisted on taking complete control of all planning. She called it her gift, to us claiming she wanted to create a celebration worthy of the family name. I was genuinely grateful at first. I had no experience with luxury events and certainly no budget to contribute. But as weeks turned into months, my gratitude curdled into growing frustration. Every single decision was made without consulting me. Victoria selected the venue, an exclusive resort high in the Aspen Mountains, before I even saw a single photograph. She chose the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the band. She even selected my wedding dress, a breathtaking creation of silk and pearls that fit like it had been designed specifically for my body. Whenever I attempted to offer input, my suggestions were politely acknowledged and then completely ignored. My ideas about incorporating some of my father's memory were dismissed as too morbid for a celebration. My request for a smaller, more intimate ceremony was overruled as inappropriate for a family of their standing. Eventually, I stopped fighting. I told myself the details did not really matter. The only thing that truly mattered was becoming Nathan's wife. The wedding day finally arrived, wrapped in October gold. The resort perched high in the mountains, surrounded by aspen trees, burning with brilliant fall color. Fresh snow dusted the distant peaks. The air was crisp and clean and utterly perfect. I walked down an aisle blanketed with white rose petals, my arm linked through my brother Caleb's, since we had no father to give me away. 200 guests watched as I said my vows to Nathan, most of them strangers I had never met before. It should have been the happiest day of my entire life. But strange undercurrents kept disrupting the surface perfection. Throughout the ceremony and reception, Nathan kept disappearing to take phone calls. Each time his expression would harden before he slipped away to some private corner. When I asked what was happening, he blamed work emergencies. A major case was apparently heating up. Colleagues needed his constant input. I accepted his explanations without much question. He was a successful attorney. These demands came with the territory. But other oddities nagged at the edges of my awareness. During cocktail hour, I spotted Victoria in intense whispered conversation with a man I had never seen before. He was perhaps 60, silver-haired with the unmistakable bearing of old money and power. They were huddled near a service entrance, speaking in urgent tones. When they noticed me approaching, they separated immediately. Victoria explained he was an old family friend there to offer congratulations. Something about the exchange felt rehearsed and false. But before I could investigate further, photographers whisked me away for more pictures. Later that evening, while guests danced and the band played, I slipped away to find a moment of quiet. On my way back to the reception, I passed behind a tall, decorative arrangement where Victoria was speaking again with the same silver-haired man. I froze when I heard my own name. Victoria's voice was low and clipped. She asked if everything was in place. The man assured her it was handled. After tonight, he said everything would proceed exactly as planned. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was happening after tonight? What plan were they discussing? Why did it involve me? I wanted to confront them right there, but I was wearing a $20,000 gown surrounded by hundreds of strangers, and the rational part of my brain insisted I must be overreacting. They could have been discussing anything: a business arrangement, a surprise gift, something perfectly innocent. I returned to the celebration and tried desperately to shake off my growing unease. Before the night ended, I sought out Megan. She had been unusually quiet throughout the entire day, hovering at the edges of festivities rather than participating. I found her standing alone on a moonlit terrace, holding a glass of champagne she had barely touched. I asked if everything was all right. She turned to me with eyes shadowed by something I could not identify. She forced a smile and claimed exhaustion from the long journey. But then she pulled me into a hug that felt more like goodbye than celebration. When she released me, she gripped my shoulders and stared directly into my eyes. She told me I deserved to be happy. She said if anything ever happened, anything at all, I should remember that I deserved better than this. I pressed her urgently to explain what she meant. But someone called her name from inside, and the moment shattered like glass. She squeezed my hand once, almost desperately, and disappeared back into the party. I stood alone on that terrace, the cold mountain wind cutting through my gown, and assured myself that everything was perfectly fine. I was married now. I was happy. Nothing could possibly ruin this. After the last guests departed and the reception hall fell silent, Nathan swept me into his arms and carried me across the threshold of our honeymoon suite. The room was a vision of pure romance. A massive canopied bed draped in white silk, a fireplace crackling with golden flames, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the moonlit mountains, champagne chilling in a silver bucket, rose petals scattered across every available surface. Nathan set me down gently and kissed me with a tenderness that made me forget every strange moment from the day. We laughed and toasted and talked about how magical everything had been. We changed out of our formal wear. I slipped into a silk nightgown I had purchased specifically for this occasion. He wore a soft robe over comfortable pajamas. We curled together on the enormous bed, watching flames dance in the fireplace, feeling utterly content and completely in love. Around 1 a.m, his phone buzzed loudly on the nightstand. I felt him tense beside me. He reached for the phone and examined the screen. Something shifted behind his eyes. Warmth drained away, instantly replaced by something hard and guarded and unfamiliar. He announced that he needed to take this call. Work emergency. Just a moment. He kissed my forehead lightly and stepped out onto the balcony, sliding the glass door closed behind him. I lay back against the pillows and waited. Through the glass, I watched him pace back and forth, his free hand gesturing sharply, his voice rising and falling, though I could not make out any words. Whatever this conversation involved, it was clearly not routine business. The call stretched to almost 20 minutes. When he finally came back inside, his expression was carefully controlled, but tension radiated from every line of his body. He explained that something urgent had come up, something that absolutely could not wait until morning. He needed to go downstairs and meet with someone, just for a few minutes. He promised he would be right back. He kissed my forehead once more. He told me he loved me with words that now ring hollow in my memory. Then he walked out of the suite and pulled the door closed softly behind him. I lay there in that massive bed surrounded by roses and silk and the dying embers of what I thought was perfect happiness, listening to the fire crackle and the wind whisper against the windows. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily. Outside, snow had begun to fall in fat white flakes drifting past the glass. I told myself there was nothing to worry about. Nathan was a successful lawyer. Emergency meetings happened all the time in his world. I must have drifted off to sleep because violent pounding on the door jolted me violently awake. My heart slammed into overdrive. I threw off the covers and stumbled across the room, nearly tangling in the hem of my nightgown in my haste. The pounding continued urgent and desperate and relentless. I fumbled with the lock and wrenched the door open. Megan stood in the hallway. Her face was completely drained of all color, white as fresh snow. Her eyes were wild with barely controlled terror. In her trembling hands, she clutched a crumpled brown paper bag. Before I could form a single word, she shoved past me into the room. She kicked the door shut behind her and thrust the bag into my arms with desperate force. I looked inside. Stacks of cash, $100 bills bound with rubber bands, more money than I had ever seen in my entire life. I looked up at Megan, my mouth hanging open, completely unable to process what was happening. She grabbed my shoulders with bruising intensity. "You have to leave," she said. Her voice was ragged and broken and terrified. "Right now, this very second. Do not wait for Nathan. Do not ask questions. Take this money and run. Run as fast as your legs will carry you, and do not stop for anything or anyone." I stood frozen in my silk nightgown, clutching a paper bag stuffed with more cash than I had ever seen, while Megan's frantic words crashed over me in relentless waves. I demanded to know what was happening. Where was Nathan? Why in the world did I need to run? Her eyes kept darting toward the door, as if expecting it to explode inward at any second. When she finally spoke, her words tumbled out in a terrified rush that I struggled to follow. She told me Nathan was already married. The room seemed to tilt violently. I grabbed the bedpost to keep from collapsing onto the floor. She explained everything in breathless fragments that gradually formed a horrifying picture. 3 years before he ever met me, Nathan had married a woman named Christina. She was the daughter of their father's most crucial business partner, a powerful man whose connections and capital had been instrumental in expanding the family empire. For complicated business and legal reasons, the marriage had been kept completely secret from the public. Nathan had never divorced Christina. They were still legally married at this very moment, which meant that his marriage to me, the beautiful ceremony that had taken place just hours earlier, was nothing more than an elaborate, worthless fraud. I shook my head violently. That could not possibly be true. Nathan loved me. He had pursued me relentlessly for 2 years, proposed in front of our families, stood at that altar, and made vows before 200 witnesses. Megan gripped my hands with desperate intensity, forcing me to meet her terrified gaze. She told me Christina had discovered everything. Someone had sent her photographs from the wedding ceremony. She had immediately boarded a private plane and was now at this very resort. At this very moment, she was downstairs confronting Nathan about his bigamy and betrayal. But that was far from the worst part. The family had absolutely no intention of letting Nathan divorce Christina. Her father's business partnership was simply too valuable to risk. The contracts, the connections, the money flowing between their families was too important to sacrifice. Instead of handling the situation honestly, they had devised an elaborate plan to completely eliminate me as a problem. Not physically, Megan hastened to clarify. They were not going to harm me, but they were going to utterly and completely destroy me in every other way imaginable. Victoria had hired private investigators to dig through every corner of my past. When that exhaustive search yielded nothing useful, she had simply manufactured evidence from nothing: forged documents, manipulated photographs, fabricated communications, all of it carefully designed to paint me as a calculating gold digger who had deliberately targeted Nathan to access his family's considerable wealth. When Christina confronted me publicly, they planned to unleash all of this fabricated evidence. I would be branded as the villain, the homewrecker, the con artist who had tricked an innocent man into a fraudulent marriage. The story would explode across social media and tabloid newspapers. My reputation would be utterly demolished. My beloved teaching career would be finished forever. And while I was dealing with the total destruction of my life, they would quietly annul my fake marriage to Nathan and pretend the entire mess had never happened at all. Wave after wave of nausea swept through me. The room spun in sickening circles. I sank onto the edge of the bed, still clutching that bag of money in trembling hands. I asked Megan why she was doing this, why she was betraying her own family to help me escape. Her face crumpled with anguish and guilt. She said she simply could not stand by and watch an innocent person be systematically destroyed. She said she had witnessed her family do many questionable things over the years to protect their wealth and reputation, but this crossed every line she had. She could not live with herself if she did not at least try to help me get away. The $25,000 was money she had taken from Victoria's personal safe. She knew exactly where her mother kept the combination. It was enough she desperately hoped to give me a fighting chance to start over somewhere safe. Then she reached into her coat and produced a small USB drive. She pressed it firmly into my palm, her fingers trembling violently. She told me everything I would need to fight back was on that tiny drive. Nathan's original marriage certificate to Christina, proving beyond any doubt that he was still legally married when he proposed to me. Screenshots of text messages between Victoria and her lawyers discussing the defamation scheme in explicit, damning detail. Audio recordings of family conversations about systematically destroying my reputation. Megan had been covertly gathering this evidence for weeks. She had prayed Nathan would come to his senses and abandon the terrible plan. But he had not. And now time had completely run out. She urged me to move immediately. Christina was creating chaos downstairs. Security had been called. Any moment someone might come searching for me to drag me into the ugly confrontation. I moved as if trapped in a waking nightmare. I grabbed my suitcase and threw in whatever I could reach. My wallet, my phone, a random dress. I did not even bother changing out of my nightgown. There was simply no time. Megan guided me through the resort service corridors. We passed laundry facilities and storage rooms and staff break areas, carefully avoiding the main hallways where guests or security might spot us. Fluorescent lights buzzed harshly overhead. My bare feet slapped against cold concrete floors. At a rear exit, a taxi sat idling with its engine running. Megan had thought of absolutely everything. She pulled me into one final, fierce embrace. She apologized over and over for her family, for her brother, for everything they had done and planned to do to me. She told me to be strong. She told me to fight back with everything I had. She told me I deserved infinitely better than anything they had ever offered me. Then she pushed me firmly toward the waiting car and vanished back into the building. I collapsed into the back seat, clutching my bag of cash and my USB drive and the shattered fragments of everything I had believed to be true. The driver asked where I wanted to go. The airport, I heard myself whisper. The voice did not even sound like my own anymore. As we pulled away from the resort into the snowy darkness, I turned for one last look. The Honeymoon suite windows glowed golden against the dark mountainside. Somewhere inside that building, the man I had married just hours ago was confronting his actual wife, while his family prepared to systematically annihilate me. I faced forward into the darkness and did not look back again. The flight from Aspen to Denver lasted 2 hours that felt like 2 separate lifetimes. I sat in my cramped economy seat wearing a wrinkled dress hastily pulled over my wedding nightgown, my hair completely disheveled, mascara streaked beneath my exhausted eyes. Flight attendants gave me concerned sidelong glances. Other passengers whispered and stared openly. I ignored absolutely all of it. The paper bag rested heavy on my lap, $25,000, the currency of my desperate survival. Somewhere over the mountain range, the tears finally arrived, silent and unstoppable, streaming down my face until my chest physically ached from suppressed sobs. The businessman beside me pretended to be completely absorbed in his laptop screen. I was grateful for his deliberate, studied indifference. When the plane finally touched down, gray dawn was just beginning to seep across the eastern horizon. I took a taxi directly to my mother's house, the small ranch where I had grown up, where I had always felt safest in the entire world. I knocked on her door at 6 a.m, looking like a ghost of the radiant bride I had been just 24 hours earlier. My mother opened the door in her worn bathrobe, her expression shifting from sleepy confusion to sharp alarm the instant she saw my devastated face. She pulled me inside without uttering a single question. She held me tight while I wept uncontrollably. She made tea while I fumbled desperately for coherent words. And when I finally managed to recount everything that had happened, she listened with the same quiet, unwavering strength that had carried our small family through every hardship we had ever faced. She did not panic. She did not collapse. She simply took my trembling hands in her steady ones and promised me we would navigate this nightmare together. The following days dissolved into a fog of grief and mounting fury. I could not eat. I could barely close my eyes without seeing Nathan's face, hearing his voice professing eternal love as he walked out that door toward his actual wife. I had been spectacularly foolish. I had dismissed every instinct, ignored every warning sign chosen, beautiful fairy tales over harsh reality. And now I was paying the devastating price. My phone erupted with messages. Nathan calling repeatedly, pleading desperately for a chance to explain everything. Victoria leaving voicemails laced with barely veiled threats about consequences if I spoke to anyone. Unfamiliar numbers that were surely lawyers or investigators circling like hungry vultures. I powered off the phone completely and buried it deep in a drawer. On the 4th day, something fundamental inside me shifted. I was sitting at my mother's kitchen table, staring blankly at a cold cup of coffee, when I realized I faced a critical choice that would define the rest of my life. I could allow this devastating betrayal to completely demolish me. I could spend the rest of my existence as a perpetual victim, broken beyond repair by people who had never viewed me as anything more than an inconvenient obstacle to be removed. Or I could fight back with every ounce of strength I possessed. I retrieved the USB drive from my suitcase, the evidence Megan had jeopardized absolutely everything to provide. I thought about my students, their eager young faces, their unconditional trust in me. I had taught them to be brave in the face of adversity, to stand up for themselves, to believe that right would eventually prevail. I thought about my father, who had labored his entire life building things for other people, who had died still believing that honest, hardworking people could succeed in this world against all odds. I absolutely refused to let Nathan and his family prove him wrong. That very afternoon, I consulted a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Delgado, and she specialized in family law and complex fraud litigation. Her firm's website specifically mentioned advocating passionately for people who had been exploited by those with greater resources and power. The description resonated deeply with everything I was experiencing. I used a portion of Megan's cash to pay her substantial retainer fee. At our initial meeting, I presented absolutely everything: the USB drive, the secret bigamous marriage, Victoria's elaborate scheme to fabricate damaging evidence, all of it laid out completely and honestly. Patricia listened without interruption. When I finally finished, she inserted the USB into her computer and meticulously reviewed every single file for nearly an hour. When she finally looked up, her expression combined righteous fury with steely determination. She confirmed that I had an extremely powerful case. Nathan had committed bigamy, a serious felony under Colorado law carrying potential prison time. His family had actively conspired to defraud and defame me. The documentation on that USB drive was absolutely devastating to their position. She outlined our comprehensive strategy. First, we would petition for immediate annulment on the grounds that Nathan was already legally married when he proposed to me. Second, we would file a formal complaint with the Colorado Bar Association regarding his fitness to practice law. Third, we would initiate an aggressive civil lawsuit for fraud, criminal conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And if the family attempted any retaliation using their manufactured evidence, we would be completely prepared to counter. We would expose every message, every recording, every single documented element of their plan to destroy an innocent woman. I departed her office experiencing something I had not felt since Megan crashed through my hotel door in the middle of that terrible night. Genuine hope. The legal process unfolded with surprising velocity. Patricia's experienced team authenticated every single piece of evidence on the USB. They unearthed additional documentation of Nathan's marriage to Christina, records that had been concealed but never properly destroyed. They assembled comprehensive filings that would completely demolish the foundations the family had fought so desperately to protect. The Bar Association complaint went out first, then the annulment petition, then the civil action, and then somehow the entire story escaped to the national media. I never discovered exactly how the leak occurred. Patricia swore under oath it was not her office. I harbored strong suspicions that Megan had discreetly contacted a sympathetic investigative journalist, one final act of rebellion against the family that had weaponized her loyalty for years. Regardless of the source, the impact was absolutely seismic. Headlines blazed with accusations of bigamy and systematic betrayal. Photographs from my wedding appeared alongside images of Christina, both of us presented as victims of the same charismatic fraud. News crews descended on the family's various properties. Business associates began publicly severing all ties with Gregory's tainted company. Nathan attempted desperate damage control. He gave tearful interviews claiming emotional confusion, insisting he had genuinely loved both women and never intended to harm anyone. The performance was utterly pathetic. Public opinion turned decisively and permanently against him. Victoria deployed her own aggressive counteroffensive, releasing carefully crafted statements, painting me as a calculating gold digger who had deliberately targeted her innocent son. But the USB evidence had already been entered into official court records. When journalists acquired copies through legal channels, her carefully fabricated narrative collapsed completely under the weight of her own documented words. Christina filed for divorce within days of the scandal erupting. She issued her own powerful statement expressing solidarity with me and condemning Nathan's systematic deception of us both. We were both victims of the same manipulative man, she declared. She hoped we would both find peace and justice. Her unexpected support meant more than she probably ever realized. The legal proceedings concluded faster than anyone had anticipated. Nathan's expensive attorneys attempted every possible delaying tactic, but the evidence was simply overwhelming. The annulment was granted in under 4 months. My fraudulent marriage to Nathan was legally voided, officially declared never to have validly existed at all. The criminal prosecution took longer but ultimately reached a definitive resolution. Nathan pleaded guilty to bigamy charges in exchange for reduced sentencing. He received 2 years of supervised probation, mandated counseling, and substantial restitution payments to both Christina and me. The Bar Association revoked his law license permanently. The prestigious career that had defined his entire identity was completely and irrevocably destroyed. Gregory's company hemorrhaged clients and investors in the scandal's devastating aftermath. Major contracts evaporated overnight. Financial partners withdrew all support immediately. The empire Victoria had schemed so ruthlessly to protect began fragmenting irreparably from within. And Victoria herself, the calculating mastermind behind the entire conspiracy against me, was humiliated in ways she could never have possibly foreseen. Her own documented words became the irrefutable evidence of her cruelty and malice. She was condemned in newspapers across the country, vilified across social media platforms, completely ostracized from the society circles she had cultivated her entire adult life. Justice, when it finally arrived, was comprehensive and complete. 1 full year after my wedding day, I sat on my small apartment balcony watching the sun descend toward the distant mountain peaks. So much had transformed since that terrible night in Aspen. I had moved into my own comfortable place, a cozy 1-bedroom with excellent natural light and sufficient space for my growing collection of books and thriving plants. I had resumed teaching full-time, welcomed back warmly by students who presented handmade cards and colleagues who treated me with genuine respect and admiration. My life had become simpler, but infinitely more authentically mine. I was not the identical person I had been before Nathan entered my world. I was considerably more guarded now, much slower to extend trust, far less inclined to believe in romantic fairy tales. But I was also immeasurably stronger. I understood now that I could endure the absolute worst and emerge still standing tall. That hard-won knowledge was invaluable beyond measure. Megan and I had maintained close contact throughout everything. She had severed all ties with her toxic family shortly after the scandal broke, relocating to a distant city to build a completely fresh start. She was establishing a fulfilling medical practice focused on community clinics, serving patients who could never afford expensive specialist fees. Each time we spoke, she sounded noticeably lighter, finally liberated from the crushing expectations she had shouldered her entire existence. I had absolved her of her family's terrible transgressions long ago. She had demonstrated her true character that night in the hotel, choosing integrity and courage when silence and complicity would have been infinitely easier. Nathan attempted to reach me several times during those early difficult months. Emails I deleted completely unread. A handwritten letter I discarded immediately unopened. Eventually, his efforts ceased entirely. News reports indicated he had relocated far out of state, attempting to somehow reconstruct some version of a life from the ashes of his disgrace. I neither wished him well nor wished him particular ill. He had simply become completely irrelevant to my existence. Carrying resentment toward him would only contaminate my own hard-won peace. My mother once asked whether I regretted ever meeting Nathan, whether I wished I had declined that charity gala invitation, refused his dinner offers, never surrendered to the beautiful illusion he had so carefully constructed. I reflected carefully before finally responding. I told her no. I harbored absolutely no regrets, because without Nathan, I would never have discovered how genuinely formidable I truly was. I would never have learned that devastating betrayal and total destruction could be survived and completely transcended. I would never have found Megan, who had evolved into a genuine, cherished friend. I would never have acquired the invaluable perspective I now possessed regarding what genuinely mattered in life. The fairy tale I had craved so desperately was always a beautiful, elaborate deception. But the authentic existence I was constructing from its ashes was absolutely real. And real, I had learned through painful experience, surpassed any fairy tale imaginable. I no longer believe in princes or perfect conclusions, or love at first sight, or guaranteed happy endings. Those are comforting narratives we construct to make the world appear simpler than harsh reality allows. But I believe in something now that matters infinitely more than any fairy tale. I believe in people like Megan, who choose genuine courage when easy cowardice would be so much simpler. I believe in dedicated advocates like Patricia, who battle tirelessly for justice when the powerful stack every possible advantage against them. I believe profoundly in the resilience of ordinary human beings who confront extraordinary suffering and somehow discover the inner strength to keep moving forward. And above all else, I believe completely in myself. That is what I extracted from the absolute worst night of my entire existence. Standing in that hotel suite, clutching a paper bag of cash, watching everything I believed dissolve into chaos, I uncovered something incredibly precious. I was enough, entirely by myself, armed with nothing but my own strength and my own choices. I was absolutely enough. Sometimes the darkest moments illuminate the brightest parts of who we truly are. Sometimes we must lose everything to fully comprehend how much we actually possess. And sometimes one person's single act of courage in a shadowed corridor can completely redirect the entire trajectory of a life. If you are watching this and navigating something terrible right now, whether betrayal or heartbreak, or any of the countless ways existence can blindside you, I want you to understand something absolutely essential. You are stronger than you currently realize. The agony you experience today will not endure forever, and the people who genuinely care about you will always discover ways to reach you even in your darkest, most desperate hour. Now, I want to hear your story. Have you ever been devastatingly betrayed by someone you trusted completely with your whole heart? How did you find the strength to pick yourself up and continue moving forward? Share your experience in the comments below. I personally read every single one, and your words might be exactly what someone else desperately needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you in any meaningful way, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps far more than you might imagine in spreading these stories to people who need them. And if you are not already subscribed to this channel, click subscribe right now so you never miss a new story. I share them every single week, authentic accounts of real people navigating the most challenging chapters of their lives. If you know someone who needs to hear this, someone weathering their own dark night, someone who requires a powerful reminder that survival remains absolutely possible, please share this video with them today. That simple act of sharing might become the lifeline they have been desperately seeking. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you sincerely for listening. Thank you for participating in a community that genuinely values truth, resilience, and the remarkable power of the human spirit. I hope wherever you find yourself, whatever tempests you are currently weathering, you remember that dawn invariably follows even the darkest night. You are deserving of genuine, authentic love. You are capable of truly extraordinary strength. And regardless of what anyone has ever done to you, the authority to compose your own story remains firmly and permanently in your hands. Take good care of yourself, and I will see